It seemed that the dark walls of my father's office, lined with massive wooden panels soaked in the noble scent of antiquity, began to slowly and inexorably close around me, like the heavy doors of an ancient closet in which they were going to lock me forever, leaving me without the right to my own voice, to my own fate, to myself. Everything in this room smelled of power, the subtle but pervasive scent of antique leather-bound books, heavy, mirror-polished wood, and soft, supple, polished leather chairs that seemed to be able to tell the stories of thousands of decisions made here, destroyed destinies, and issued verdicts. My father signed the papers with a quick, almost angry, abrupt movement, as if trying to dismiss the matter like an annoying fly that had been fluttering in front of his face for too long, annoying him with its presence. The creak of his expensive, weighty, custom-made pen sounded so loud and piercing in the deathly silence of the office that for a moment it seemed to me that he was scratching not paper, but my heart, leaving deep, painful furrows on it that could never fully heal. "Here," he said, pushing a stack of cold official papers across the immaculately polished dark walnut desk toward me. "It's done." His voice sounded indifferent, almost tired, as if he was signing not documents concerning the fate of his daughter, but another standard contract. "All $5 million from the trust fund will go to Teresa." He said it with such calmness, as if this decision was inevitable, predetermined. I was erased just like that. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. My name is Anna Smith. I'm 30 years old. And today my family has decided that I am no longer one of them. My sister Teresa was standing by the tall window, as if she had happened to be there, but I saw her half turn away, barely hiding the satisfied, triumphant grin playing on her lips. She didn't say a word, and it wasn't necessary, because the victory clearly visible in her cold eyes screamed louder than any phrase. My mother, dressed in a severe gray suit, sighed from a large leather armchair behind me, sighed as if she had rehearsed this moment in her head many times, and now, finally, it happened. "If only you had followed a more traditional path, Anna," she began, and her voice was full of weariness and reproach. "If only you'd gone to law school like Teresa." She paused, giving me time to feel the guilt she thought I should be feeling. "If you would just make an effort," she concluded her speech, as if putting the last point in my personal file. "I made an effort," I said softly, almost in a whisper, but clearly enough to be heard. My voice didn't rise. It wasn't necessary. I already knew what was going to happen next. I knew every next remark, every look, every note in their voices. I saw my father's face tense with disappointment, as the muscles of his jaw played under his skin, betraying the storm hidden behind his icy exterior. "Playing with computers in your small apartment is not an effort," he said abruptly, getting up so quickly that his heavy chair scraped on the floor, pushing back. "Your sister is a partner at Williams & Edwards at 33. He pronounced it as a verdict, as an indisputable proof of her superiority. "And you? You create websites for cafes and dog hairdressers." He uttered the last words with such contempt that the air in the room seemed to tremble. "You live in a shoebox in the city. This is not the future. It's a hobby." I could have stopped him right there. I could tell him about the company I created from scratch, about the financial technology platform that was gradually gaining attention in Silicon Valley, about a platform that uses intelligent algorithms to help small investors make more informed decisions, which no one has done like we have. I could tell him about the meeting I'm having tomorrow, about the meeting with investors who are ready to write checks for tens of millions of dollars, that we just closed Series A and that our company is already valued at $450 million. But I didn't do it. I knew it wouldn't matter. For my parents, success was measured by only one yardstick: a tailored suit, a corner office, and the prestigious company name etched on a massive plaque. Everything else for them was just an illusion, a game of life. "You're right about the end of your name," I said calmly, getting up from the chair, slowly, restrainedly, so as not to betray the pain tearing at me from the inside out with a single movement. "I'm not what you wanted me to be." "Teresa deserves money," I said, and at that moment Teresa flinched slightly, as if my words had struck at the very core of her inner triumph. For a split second, I had an image of the sister I knew as a child, the one who sneaked into my room with cookies when I had nightmares, the one who helped me copy off my math homework and assured me that I was smarter than anyone might think. "Anna," she began softly, but I raised my hand before she could finish. "It's okay, Teresa." "Indeed." I smiled out of the corner of my lips, trying to hide my bitterness. "Congratulations on acquiring a partner. You deserve it." When I turned to the door, ready to leave without looking back, Mom called out to me from behind, her voice sounding unexpectedly soft. "Could you at least join us for dinner? Your father has reserved a table at Le Bernardin restaurant to celebrate the occasion." I stopped in the doorway, taking one last look around the office, which seemed truly alien, despite the fact that all the years of my childhood and youth had passed here. The walls, dark and massive, were literally filled with framed law degrees, awards for achievements in the courtroom, and photographs of my parents and Teresa, with their dazzling smiles, confidently marching through life, conquering the heights. Each of these images suggested that they were people with impeccable status and greatness, who are usually spoken of in enthusiastic tones. But here's what was really strange: not a single photo of me, not a single sign of my achievements. There was nothing to remind me of my life, that I had ever existed in this world, that I was not the empty place they were trying to make me. It was as if everything had been thought out in advance, and in this room, under this roof, there was no Anna, only characters consistent with the imposed roles: parents, Teresa, but not me. "I have a meeting," I said, trying to stay calm, even though this moment was throwing me off balance. "But enjoy your dinner." It was the only thing I could say without letting my emotions run wild, without losing control completely. I could hear how my words, despite their invisibility, pierced the atmosphere of the office, but there was no need for that. I took a step towards the door and slowly closed it without looking back, although inwardly I felt torn by the fact that I was leaving this world behind. The return to the city took place in silence. The car drove me through the streets at night, sliding on smooth asphalt without making a single unnecessary sound, and the only sound I could hear was the hum of the engine and the constant echoing soundtrack of my thoughts. I seemed to be in some kind of vague gap between the state of reality and fantasy, and strangely enough, I did not feel anger. There was no bitterness, although it seemed that this was my last hope of salvation, to get out of it, to defend at least a part of myself. I wasn't even sad, although I probably should have felt it. It wasn't money I was losing. I had plenty of them now, even more than I could ever spend, even more than I knew how to use. But it was much more painful to realize that even after all that I had built, all this was not enough for those who once called me their daughter. Even my successes, the world I had created with my own hands, seemed empty in the eyes of these people, worthless. They expected something else, something tangible, something they could feel successful in, something familiar and understandable. Everything I did seemed alien to them, useless. When I returned to my apartment, a small, cramped dwelling that my father so mockingly called a shoebox, I kicked off my heels and headed straight to my small home office. Inside, despite everything that had happened, I felt at peace, almost at peace. Here, in this small corner of the world, in my own kingdom, I had everything I needed: knowledge, technology, and the belief that I could make the world a better place, even if it took time to understand it. The screens on the wall were softly glowing, displaying data from our last user interface system test. The numbers scrolling quickly on the displays were like living beings who, without resting, went to their goal, step by step confirming success. Every update on the screen was proof that we weren't wrong. "We've created something powerful that really works, unlike everything my sister and I tried to build in this old house full of fake ambitions." The computer games my parents used to laugh at turned into something completely different. We created ATNA, an adaptive neural trading analytics system that could predict stock market movements with such accuracy that no human trader could achieve what our platform achieved. It processed millions of data points in a matter of seconds, revealing patterns and hidden trends that would have gone unnoticed by an ordinary person, and this gave us an incredible advantage. Then the bell rang. The phone, which I had almost forgotten to put on the table, caught my attention again. It was Sophia, my technical director, with whom we worked daily to improve the system. There was some anxiety in her voice, which immediately alerted me. "Hi," she said with obvious tension. "How are things in the family?" I sighed, pushing away the meaningless thoughts that suddenly came flooding back to me. As expected, Dad handed over the trust fund to Teresa, and all that was left for me was disappointment, stupid attempts to come to terms with what I could never achieve in their eyes. "They're probably celebrating at Le Bernardin right now," I said, and there was a bitterness in those words that I was trying to hide. Sophia didn't respond to my remark. Perhaps she realized that there was too much pain and despair in those words, but she couldn't do anything to ease it. Sophia shook her head, her expression a mixture of surprise and mild irony. There was interest in her eyes, but also concern, something that I could interpret as a sign that she still doubted my decision. "Their loss," she said with some regret, as if justifying the fact that I refused the proposed venture capital. She paused, choosing her words, and finally, with sincere interest, asked, "Are you ready to show these venture capitalists what real success looks like tomorrow?" It was a question I couldn't ignore, and I nodded without thinking, opening another screen on my desktop filled with fresh test results. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. After all, there was going to be a meeting with big investors, and the money they offered was impressive. But something was bothering me. What if we don't take their money? What if, instead of bowing to them, we offer them a partnership, show them our strength and independence? Sophia blinked silently, clearly not understanding my turn of thought. She frowned. "Wait, what?" Her voice was full of surprise. "Anna, we are talking about an investment of $21 million, out of an estimated $450 million. She was right. This is really a lot of money that could provide us not only with security, but also with prospects for rapid growth." "That's the problem," I said, straightening up and looking at the data screen, which showed a completely unexpected result. "This is petty thinking," I continued. "Look at these results. We are ahead of the curve. We could go public in a year. If we take their money now, we will give up control, but if we wait, we will be able to build something large-scale on our terms, without dependence on external forces." Silence fell in the room, and Sophia fell silent, digesting everything I had just said. It was the moment when it became clear to me that we were on the verge of something more, and it was necessary to take a step that would guarantee our independence and power. After a few seconds, a slow smile spread across her face, and she said softly, "You don't need a company, you need an empire." I smiled back, but the whole meaning of those words was reflected in my eyes. Not just an empire, I thought, but something more, something that could change the very essence of how the financial world works. I want to build something that even my father can't ignore, something that would attract the attention of everyone who has ever doubted my ability to make the impossible possible. And although I could thank Sophia for her words, I knew that her assessment was accurate to some extent. That was really my goal, my ideal. "You know he's a corporate lawyer, right?" Sophia continued, laughing. "If this technology is so innovative, hasn't he heard of it before?" I shook my head. "Sophia, the man is still using a BlackBerry," I said with a hint of sarcasm in my voice. "He believes that programming is something that can be learned in weekend classes at a community center. He never even asked me what I was really doing. And now it's too late." I was neither offended nor bitter. I was calm because I understood that everyone has their own place in life, and if they are not ready to see my achievements, then this is their problem, not mine. "Well," firmly, she said with determination in her voice, "it's his loss." I agreed with her. "So, what's the plan?" Her question was obvious. But I already knew what to do. "Cancel tomorrow's presentation," she suggested, but I shook my head. "No," I replied, confidently opening the next screen, "an idea has come up. We are going. But instead of asking for money, we will offer a partnership." I paused to give these words some weight. "We don't need their capital. We need access to their networks. If they open the right doors, we will grow even faster on our terms. Sophia listened in silence, then the same smile appeared on her face again, which meant that she understood everything correctly. We went our own way. 5 months have passed, and everything has changed. I stood in the center of our new office in the heart of Manhattan, in a place that once seemed out of reach, but has now become part of our reality. The room was elegant, with large floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city's financial district. The light coming inside filled the office with a special atmosphere, almost poetic, as if confirming that everything we had created was now part of this world. Institutions that once rejected our ideas were now eagerly awaiting the launch of our technology. Our engineers, passionate about their work, worked tirelessly, conducting the final stage of ATNA testing. The energy in the room was palpable. It literally vibrated with concentration and anticipation of success. Sophia called to me from across the room. "You need to see this." I approached her, holding a cup of coffee in my hand, and looked at the screen, which displayed the latest modeling results. And that's when I realized that we had moved to a whole new level. It was not just a prediction of market movements. It was a real awareness of the events that should have caused these movements, and not in the future, but before they occurred. I leaned over the screen to get a better look at the numbers, and my heart began to beat faster. I asked, squinting to make sure the data was accurate. Sophia nodded, her eyes literally glowing with excitement. "Yes, it's true," she confirmed. Athena, our system, has been triple-checked and revealed patterns in social media, news, and even minor changes in trader behavior. She predicted the announcement of the Morgan Stanley merger 3 days before its public offering. "If this were a real trade," I whispered, "we would have made billions," Sophia finished with a voice full of awe. I rubbed my temples, trying to cope with the weight of what was happening. "Have we conducted a compliance check in the past?" I asked, trying to clarify one important point. "This is the best part," Sophia said, opening a new screen with one swipe. "That's what we did. It's all clear. Athena does not use insider information. All she does is connect public dots, and she does it much better than a human could ever do." And then my phone rang. I picked him up from my desk without looking, knowing who was on the line. It was Teresa, my older sister. I instantly recognized her voice, slightly restless, which was completely natural for her. "Hi, little sister, my parents have been worried for a long time," she began with a slight hint of anxiety. "Dad says your old number doesn't work. Everything is fine." I couldn't help but smile, realizing the irony of the whole situation. Of course, the old number couldn't work anymore. I moved out of that small apartment a long time ago, where I once sat at my first computer, with which I did programming and dreamed of big business. Sophia and I did not sit idly by, but worked in a brand new office, in a $55 million building, just 6 blocks from Wall Street. But despite all this luxury and ambition, in the eyes of my family, I was still the same child who was stuck in an apartment the size of a shoebox, which means that everything is fine for them was just a matter of time. "I'm fine, I'm just busy with work," I replied, trying not to hide the slight smile that appeared on my face at such moments. It was a strange and funny situation at the same time, when your family still sees you as someone you haven't been for a long time. But it didn't matter. Another call. This time it was Jonathan, our head of the legal department. He confirmed that a meeting of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, was scheduled for next week. "They're interested in your compliance system," he said, his voice restrained, but there was clearly a note of respect and even admiration in it. "Interest is an understatement," he continued, and I heard his admiring appreciation of our work reflected in his words. As soon as rumors began to spread about our artificial intelligence-based trading system, the SEC literally begged for a meeting, trying to understand exactly what we had done before our technology blew up the financial world. I couldn't disagree with that, because everything that was happening was on the verge of unbelievable. Our developers and engineers put their whole soul into Athena, and the result of this work was not just successful, it became a phenomenon that could change the rules of the game. At that moment, the intercom rang, and I heard the voice of our secretary. "Anna, Mr. Williams is here to see you. He says he's from Williams and Edwards." My heart jumped for a moment, and I felt a shiver go down my spine. Williams and Edwards was Teresa's law firm, one of the largest and most respected in New York, trusted by major financial institutions. Mason Williams was a senior partner at the firm, a man my father would have trusted right away if he were still alive. This man was from a different league, and I knew that his visit was not going to be accidental. "Let him through," I said, quickly straightening my jacket and trying not to show the excitement that was hard to hide. At that moment, I felt like I needed to be absolutely focused and ready for anything. I knew it would be an important meeting, but at that moment I couldn't even figure out exactly what I expected from her. Mason Williams himself came through the door, a man with gray hair, in a formal suit, sleek, confident, like a man who is not used to making mistakes. He was exactly the type that was feared and respected in our field. "Miss Smith," he said, extending his hand to shake mine. "Thank you for your time. I hope you will forgive me for this unexpected visit." I invited him to sit down, pointing to a chair opposite me, and despite his formal manner, I became curious. How did he know about Athena? It was one of those things that I couldn't just ignore. "How did you even find out about Athena?" I asked, raising an eyebrow, trying not to hide a slight trace of irony. Williams just grinned, and despite all his charm, I felt like this answer would be interesting. "Let's just say that our clients in the financial world are very interested in your work," he began. His smile was confident, but there was not even a hint of the persistence that could betray hidden goals. "They asked us to explore possible partnership options," he continued, clearly hoping that I wouldn't ask unnecessary questions. "Does my sister know you're here?" I asked suddenly, raising an eyebrow and making it clear that I wasn't being fooled. His smile froze for a second. "Teresa?" "No," he replied, a little hesitantly. "This is a confidential visit. Although, I admit, I was surprised to find out that you are her sister. She never mentioned you." I gave him a small smile, deliberately encouraging him to talk. "Let me guess," I said with a smile. "Did she ever tell you that she has a sister who plays with computers?" His face showed slight confusion for a moment, but he quickly restrained himself, politely replying, "She doesn't talk much about me at all." It was true, although I didn't sound as cynical about it as I might have. I didn't know how she would react to my success, and, in fact, it doesn't really matter what someone who has long since chosen her path thinks about my achievements, without trying to understand mine. Before the awkward silence could drag on, Sophia poked her head in the door with a tablet in her hand, breaking the moment. "Anna, sorry to interrupt, but Goldman Sachs has come to the demonstration." At that moment, William's expression instantly changed. When I mentioned Goldman Sachs, I could almost see how he overestimated everything: my work, my value, even my outfit. With that, I stood up. "Mr. Williams, I appreciate your visit, but I need to attend another meeting," I said, trying not to show concern. "If your firm is interested in future conversations, feel free to contact our legal team." He stood up too, smoothing his jacket and looking at me with slight respect. "Sure, but Miss Smith," he said, returning his gaze, "whatever Goldman has to offer, we can match it. Williams and Edwards represent half of the financial giants in this city. We know people. We're opening the doors." I nodded slightly. "We'll be in touch." When he came out, I couldn't help but feel quietly satisfied. The same firm that once ignored my existence was now knocking on my door, and not just knocking, they were trying to compete. We weren't just on the radar anymore, we were on the radar, and that was just the beginning. It was such a satisfaction that it is difficult to explain in words. It wasn't about the money. Mr. Williams probably misunderstood that part. It was much deeper than just the numbers on the bill or even the contracts that could come. It was about rewriting the rules of the game, turning everything upside down, And that was exactly what we were doing. I looked him straight in the eye, full of confidence, and said, "It's not about the money, Mr. Williams. It's about changing everything." I saw his gaze freeze for a moment, and I realized that I wasn't just saying the words. I felt that he understood, and this moment, this silence that arose between us, spoke volumes. He didn't answer. "Everything has been said." After he left, there was a strange silence in the office, and Sophia, as always, was silent for a while before her gaze met mine. He was partly annoyed, partly surprised, as if she had just realized something important. "You liked that, didn't you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow, her voice a little sharper than usual. I couldn't help but admit that there was an element of truth in those words. "Maybe just a little bit," I admitted with a grin, trying to hide all my inner confidence and joy at how things were going. She leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, her gaze focused, like a person who is calculating everything. "How long do you think it will take him to tell Teresa about all this? Considering that her firm manages billions of investments?" I shrugged, feeling like there were hidden questions in the air, but I wasn't ready to delve into family squabbles right now. 10 minutes at most, I replied, not hiding a slight irony. "Right on cue," I added, meaning that news of what had happened would spread like lightning. And so, before I could finish, my phone vibrated on the table, reminding me of reality. It was a message from my sister. There was always this hidden roar of emotion on her part that couldn't be hidden even through text messages. "Anna, why didn't you tell me? Mason Williams just came out of your office looking like he saw a ghost. What exactly are you working on?" I didn't answer. There will be time for explanations and family drama later, when I can devote at least some attention to it. In the meantime, there were more important things to do, much more important than these private family squabbles. We were going to do a live demo for one of the biggest names in finance. The Goldman Sachs team was already in our conference room, and I knew that this moment was critically important to us. The 5 high-ranking executives, all in immaculate suits, tried their best to hide their excitement despite their habit of controlling their every gesture. Even bringing them here was a huge victory, and I realized that if we could attract Goldman, it would open all the doors in the world of finance that had previously been closed to us. When I went out to the front of the room, addressing them with restraint and confidence, I felt the atmosphere thicken around me, as the air molecules in the room began to vibrate with tension. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, looking into the eyes of everyone present, and my words sounded more confident than ever before. "What you're about to see will change how markets work forever. But first, I need you to sign these non-disclosure agreements." I was well aware that these words were just a formality, but they were also part of the process. We were on the verge of something really big, and I couldn't let any information leak. After all, everything we created had to be preserved and protected. And on the morning of our IPO, standing in front of the mirror and adjusting the collar of my custom-made Chanel suit, I felt everything around me shrink again, as if time had stopped again. Although my parents, as always, wouldn't notice the difference if I wore clothes from less expensive brands. In their eyes, I was always the same child who could not find his place in the adult world, and this status could not change even such an external shine. There was a Wall Street Journal on my desk with a headline that instantly caught my eye: "ATNA is preparing for the biggest tech IPO of the year. The estimated cost is $900 million. The phone hadn't stopped ringing for several days in a row. First Teresa, then Mom, and finally even Dad, all tried to call, but all their calls went unanswered. They will be at the IPO ceremony anyway. I already sent out invitations a few weeks ago, knowing that they cannot ignore this event." Sophia asked when she appeared in the doorway, having changed from her usual hoodie and jeans to a formal business suit, ready for what we had to go through. I nodded, picking up the folder with the presentations, feeling my confidence grow inside me. "I was born ready," I replied with a slight smile, taking the documents in my hands. "How are things on 8N this morning?" I asked, getting down to business, already mentally shifting all my forces to the upcoming one. "Like a dream," she said, a slight smile appearing on her face. Real-time forecasts with 98% accuracy. The trading floor is on fire. Everyone knows that this will shake up the entire market. I didn't doubt her words. By the time we arrived at the New York Stock Exchange, a crowd had already gathered there. Reporters stood in lines, camera flashes flashed, their voices echoed through the morning air. I heard excerpts of their comments, and words that had seemed fantastic to me before flashed by. The youngest female CEO to ever bring a company to the stock exchange, a new era in trading technology. ATNA's AI company already has contracts with major banks. The atmosphere inside the exchange was electrifying, and our entire team gathered near the podium, waiting for this historic moment. Representatives of leading banks and financial giants gathered in the hall. I felt tension building in my chest, because I knew that this moment would become a story for all of us, and I, standing among them, was ready to write it. I saw my family in the front row. My father's face was full of complex emotions: pride, regret, embarrassment, and something else, perhaps awe. It was so obvious that I didn't have to look at his expression for long to realize that this moment was more difficult for him than for anyone else. My mother, shocked by everything that was happening, continued to wipe her eyes, trying to hide her tears, and Teresa just looked at me as if she had seen her younger sister for the first time, as if I had suddenly become some kind of unknown being for her, causing a mixture of admiration and surprise. I stood there, feeling everyone's eyes on me, and despite all the people around me, I was completely focused on my family. "Anna," my father said softly, taking a step forward as I passed by. His voice sounded as if he had just realized something he hadn't been able to figure out for a long time. We had no idea. I stopped when I met his gaze. I always felt that this was not the kind of man who could see everything at once. He was strong, but there was a lot of closeness in that strength, and now I read not only awareness in his eyes, but also humility. "No, you didn't know." "Because you never asked," I replied calmly, and without giving him a chance to say anything, I added almost on the move, "I didn't build this for you, I built it for myself." Before he could object, the president of the exchange called me to the stage. The ceremony was about to begin, and I needed to get ready so I wouldn't miss the chance. I took my last look at my family, their eyes were still following me, and I felt like a whole era was waiting for me. I was standing on the podium, and the trading floor went quiet when I started. 4 years ago, I was coding in a tiny apartment, and if they had told me then that I would end up here in this hall, I would not have believed it. People laughed and called my efforts empty and playing with computers. But I wasn't playing, I was building a future, and that was something they couldn't understand. I froze for a moment, looking around the room, letting the weight of the moment settle. Today, thanks to ATNA, we process more market data in 1 second than Wall Street could analyze in an entire month. We have created something that not only reacts to the market, it understands it, which makes our product unique. I looked at my family. My father's eyes were glued to mine. I've seen it now. He finally saw me, not as his little daughter, but as a woman who had achieved more than he could have imagined. And that, I finished the sentence, that was just the beginning. I paused, giving the audience time to process what had happened before continuing. Our technology could predict market movements with almost perfect accuracy. That was her real greatness, her specialness. But it wasn't just technology that made her truly special. It was the power of believing in one's vision, even when no one else believed in it. And so, despite everything I had to go through, despite skepticism and reproaches, I stood here where I should have been. The IPO ceremony was held according to tradition. There were speeches, applause, handshakes, and, finally, the ringing of the bell. But the real magic happened when the price of our shares skyrocketed on the big board. The audience held their breath, and then the numbers on the screen began to grow rapidly. We disrupted the planned opening, and it was completely unexpected for everyone, including us. Cheers spread throughout the trading floor. People hugged each other, high-fived each other, and even cried with joy. It was a moment of triumph that nothing and no one could take away from us. At that moment, I was not just the CEO of a powerful technology company. I was the founder who turned the dream into a global force. And this feeling could have been the pinnacle for me if it hadn't been for one thing. At the time of launch, my stake in the company was worth more than $450 million, which was 100 times the value of the trust fund that my father took from me many years ago. It didn't matter anymore. I built something much bigger, and this moment became for me the brightest reward for everything that I went through, for all the difficulties, for all the nights when they didn't believe me. We did it. After the ceremony, my family approached me slowly, almost nervously. Teresa, my older sister, spoke first. The calm, impeccable lawyer had disappeared, and in front of me stood just a sister trying to fix everything, trying to find words that could make her look less guilty. "Anna, I'm so sorry," she said in a trembling voice, and I could hear the sincerity in her words. "All this time you've been trying to explain, but we haven't listened." I gave her a small smile. "Keep it safe," I said softly, realizing that her words were a simple step towards reconciliation, to close old wounds. "You all saw what you wanted to see," I added, not hiding my sense of victory from her or myself. My father cleared his throat, and I knew he was going to say something important. The princess asked about the trust fund, and I interrupted him, not wanting to return to this moment from the past. "Leave it alone," I said shortly, making it clear that it didn't matter now. Teresa deserved it as much as I did. I looked around the room, saw Sophia, our brilliant team, and all those who believed in a vision when it was just an idea written in code in a cramped apartment. Sometimes I would quietly say to myself, the best thing someone can do for you is not to believe in you. Because proving them wrong makes the wind much sweeter. That was my truth. "But we're a family," Mom said softly, her voice sounding as if she was trying to find an excuse in her words. "We should have supported you." I nodded, turning to Sophia and our team. I understood that we had all been through a lot. "You're right," I said, not hiding my relief. "I said we're a family, so you're all invited to dinner tonight. I have booked a private room at the Linen Arden Hotel. I've heard that this is the perfect place to celebrate success, and even if I didn't have a reason to celebrate, I would have chosen this place anyway. It seems to create an atmosphere of triumph, absorbing everything around into its brilliance and luxury." My father's face twitched with recognition. He remembered that dinner 5 months ago, when he dismissed my vision as a fantasy, not seeing anything significant in it. This time, he managed to put on a slight but respectful smile, as if he had just realized that I had not just dreamed, but made the impossible possible. "It would be an honor for us," he said in a soft accent, and I realized that his words now sounded not only proud, but also some kind of subtle appreciation. That evening, as the expensive wine flowed freely and the room filled with laughter and conversation, I looked around the table and thought about how far we had all come. Every night I wrote code, and they thought I was just playing with computers, having fun, not seeing anything important in it. Every meeting that they ignored, every small victory that took place at that moment, all this was my personal feat, my invisible steps towards what became not just a successful project, but a real empire. My phone vibrated under the table, and I looked up from my thoughts and checked the message. It was from Sophia. "The shares closed at twice our forecast price. You're officially a billionaire." I couldn't help but smile. It was more than just a financial success. It was a moment of confirmation that we weren't just playing business, but had created something amazing that could change the entire market. I looked across the room at my father, who was awkwardly but proudly trying to explain to his country club friends how his wayward daughter had just built an empire right under his nose, and at that moment I felt something important arise inside me. I didn't need to prove to anyone that I was right. I've already proved it to myself. Success is not about showing others that they were wrong, but about simply being true to your path, your idea, your beliefs, no matter what. Teresa took me aside. Her tone was different now. He was humble, sincere. I saw that her gaze had become soft, as if she had finally realized that her role in my life should not be just observant. "Anna," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." I looked at her and waited. She was about to reveal something important to me. After Mason Williams left his office that day, I started digging, she began, and I felt a revelation in her words. "I've studied everything I could find about AT&A. I even started buying shares of every company that collaborated with your technology." I raised an eyebrow, asking, "Did you believe in me?" She nodded, and her eyes shone not only with recognition, but also with some new strength. "Yes," she said. "Even if I didn't say it. I earned enough to pay back the trust fund 10 times more." I looked at her, realizing that this moment was a turning point for both of us. "Okay," I smiled. "Because I will need a lawyer that I can trust in the next stage of our expansion. Someone who understands both technology and family." Her eyes widened. "Wait, are you offering me a job?" I offered her the chance to be a part of something bigger than both of us. "So what do you say, sis? Are you ready to play with computers?" The next morning, I entered the newly renamed ADGNA Tower. Our logo shone at the top of the skyscraper as a sign that we had not just created a company, but had changed the world. I walked past a young intern who was sitting in the lobby typing a code during a break. She was so focused, so single-minded, that for a moment it seemed to me that I was seeing myself only in the past, when everyone thought I was just wasting my time. I stopped next to her and said, "Keep up the good work." Some of the biggest success stories start in the smallest apartments. She looked up, and I saw a twinkle of recognition in her eyes. "Miss Smith, I've read all about you. How you created AT&A from scratch. My parents think I'm crazy to choose programming over law school." I smiled and nodded. "That's what mine thought, too," I said, realizing that her path was just beginning. Then I left, knowing that her story was just beginning, just as mine had once begun. "You have a vision. I will help bring it to life. Hold on to this dream. Remember, people who doubt you today will read your story tomorrow." As I rode the elevator to my office, I couldn't stop thinking about my legacy. Not the one that my father tried to give me, not the one that others tried to impose on me. No, I was thinking about the legacy that you create yourself, step by step, line by line, choice by choice. Athena didn't just change the way money moved. She showed the world that success doesn't always lie in wearing a suit or following the rules. Sometimes the most important legacy is not something that is inherited. It's something that you build from scratch, despite everything that others thought of you.